So, from my many years of being an environmental advocate, I want to share with you some tips.
Conversations with people who do extraordinary things, each guest sharing his or her passions, experience, and accomplishments. Our guest today is Maltese Center member, Miss Beth Fiteni. She's the executive director of Green Inside and Out, a nonprofit whose mission it is to educate on matters of toxins and environmental health, and host a monthly radio show on WUSB Stony Brook University Radio. Beth holds a master's degree in environmental law from Vermont Law School, as well as 20 years of experience working in the environmental movement for nonprofit organizations in DC and New York. She is also the author of the book, The Green Wardrobe Guide, Finding Eco-Chic Fashions That Look Great and Help Save the Planet. She was trained by former Vice President Al Gore in 2012 and lectures regularly all over Long Island on non-toxic, energy-efficient green living in both English and Spanish. She has also won numerous awards, including the Distinguished Long Island Sierra Club Environmentalist of the Year in 2017. Welcome, Beth. Thank you for joining us today. Over the past few years, I've had the opportunity to meet you at the center. Tell me a bit about where you grew up and how you became involved with environmental advocacy.
Sure. So I grew up in Huntington, Long Island, and that's still where I live now, but I've lived in different places over the course of years. And I got involved in environmental issues because even since I was a little child, I knew that I loved animals. And I thought that I wanted to be a veterinarian at first, but then I realized when I had to give dogs shots, I said, no, I just can't do it. So I was always naturally good at science, and it just sort of naturally formed into, wanting to take care of the environment so I could take care of all the animals and people. So I think, my dad and I used to go, and my mom used to go camping when I was young. So I think I was just exposed to nature early and had an appreciation for it from early on. Ooh, muted.
So when you did start to go in this direction, how did you get started establishing your Green Inside and Out?
Yeah, so actually, I've worked for a bunch of different nonprofit environmental organizations in DC and also in New York. And I had been working on some toxins issues when I worked at Sustainability Institute at Malloy College for many years. And but then my career sort of took me in the direction of working more on energy issues, which is great. So like now I work for the New York State Department of Public Service, where I oversee some clean energy policy issues there for the Long Island area. But I also had this itch to continue the work on toxins. So, things just started coming together. I started a blog, and then I was given the opportunity to do a radio show through a friend that had a show she wanted to share. And so that's pretty much how Green Inside and Out formed. And then in 2017, it became I had started in 2011, but then in 2017, we started a nonprofit organization with a board of directors and all of that, with the hope of getting grants, which we haven't gotten yet, but I'm still hoping.
So that's one of the challenges, right? Is getting grants and funding. And so
Yeah.
in that interim, how do you fund yourselves and how do you keep moving forward?
Well, we pretty much rely on individual donations at the moment. We also, I've actually been putting in my own money to some extent, just because I love the work so much. And with the podcast, we're able to do sponsorships. So we're seeking, green sponsorships for the podcast. We're basically taking the interviews that I do for the radio show monthly and turning them, into a format that you can listen to on Apple Podcasts and all that stuff. Thankfully, I have young people working for me that know how to do all that stuff. But the radio show is, you know, that's where I interview different environmental leaders, and I really like to focus on the positive things that are happening because we hear so much negative news. I always think it's great to have to, highlight people that are trying to put in place solutions and give everyone tips of how they can be involved or things they can do themselves and things like that. So.
And so explain exactly the organization. What are their, you know, main topics, and what do you really focus on when you're, you know, promoting your organization and your needs?
Yeah, so we mostly have focused on the issue of toxins in everyday products like pesticides, cleaning products have chemicals in them, body care products, even, our makeup and shampoos all have chemicals for the most part. And in the last few years, actually, Green Inside and Out has joined a coalition called the Just Green Partnership, which
Mhm.
is made up of environmental organizations from all around New York State. And so we get to work on statewide issues in Albany. Like we have people that go and lobby and try to get like toxins out of children's toys and things like that. So that's been a really interesting endeavor. And then, of course, sustainable fashion, like you mentioned. So I
Mhm.
have the book, The Green Wardrobe Guide. It took me 8 years to write that book. I don't think I would have done it had I known what I was getting into, actually. But I'm really glad that it's out there. And it was sort of an extension of all that. So, like, I had worked for a pesticides organization down in DC in my late 20s, in the late 90s, and giving away my age. But that's where I started to learn about organic cotton. And I always had to go out and give talks and things, and I would say, "Oh, look, I'm wearing organic cotton, like this shirt I'm wearing, and this sweater is from Malta, of course." But, people always wanted to touch it. They'd say, "Oh, where'd you get that? What does it feel like?" So I said, "Well, someone should write a book." So that's how that whole thing developed. But now, actually, there's so much interest in it now. The tide is really turning, and all the fashion institutes are having this part of their curriculum. So it's really exciting.
Right,
Um,
you walk the talk.
yeah, I try to. I definitely try. But like we had a campaign on dry cleaning chemicals a few years ago where I worked with a Suffolk County legislator out here on Long Island to make sure that there's signage in the dry cleaners when you go into the shop so that you know what chemical they're using, because the perchloroethylene is actually a carcinogen and most people don't even think about these things. We also did a campaign with the same legislator, Kara Han, about plastic straws, which I understand, like most people are like, oh, who cares about these plastic straws? But it's kind of like an avenue to raise awareness. Once people start thinking about that, they think about other plastics that they're using. And obviously, we know we have plastics in the ocean now and all that kind of thing. Oh, there's my dad. There's Mr. Roy Fiteni himself. So these are just a few of the campaigns we've been working on, and I'm really hoping to also work on the issue of food waste here on Long Island. That's the next campaign. If we can get some funding, hopefully we'll see. And again, just continuing to work in my day job on all the clean energy issues and try to help some of the advocates and the
Right.
industry that's on Long Island.
Right. So yeah, that was going to be my next question of the challenges that you face, with all these initiatives that you're hoping become the norm, because of course, everybody has an agenda, and people don't like change when things are in place. And could you kind of explain that? Like, I know it's a far-reaching question, but maybe you can, explain, some of the big challenges that you're facing right now.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, what I've encountered is not so much direct opposition, at least on the local level. It's more just inertia, not knowing that things are important that need to be addressed. Like, most people don't think about food waste or clothing waste. That's another thing. We're writing a white paper on why it's important to recycle your clothing, and just raising the awareness. I think that's a big challenge, but that's why we exist. It's what we do. But again, lack of funding, just getting grants and things to keep us going so I have a couple of staff people that help me out with the website and all the things we do. Um, Also I notice at work when it comes to clean energy, these things do cost money. It costs money to put in solar panels, for example, up front. So the government comes up with programs to help people with financing, for example, so that way you can pay back over time, and actually you start to save so much money that it's usually a net savings from the get-go, from the beginning. But getting people to understand that and say, oh, they just look at the front price tag, they might not understand it's actually saving them money in the long run.
Right. So
So
what are like
things
some
like that.
simple ways for people to wrap their head around that? Like, like that whole myth or fact, like, green energy or living organically, and, the expense and the savings, sometimes there's um, a, a big expense put up front, but then in the long term, it's savings and saving the planet at the same time. But sometimes it's hard for people to wrap around it because, like they're just looking, this close. They're not looking down the line and, further out into the future. How can that be explained? I know we try to do it in a simple fashion, but even more simply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, certainly my dad will always tell you, he'd say, why do you pay extra for that organic food, Um, Sometimes green products, when you go out to buy like recycled products or organic products, they can be more expensive because, for example, with organic food, the farmers have to pay for certifications. And, sometimes since they're not using pesticides, they have a little bit of crop loss, so they have to make up for that. Some of it may be markup at the store as well, of course. But again, like with I find it as an investment in our health because otherwise you're putting yourself more at risk. We're exposed to so many chemicals. At least this is one thing that we can try to control. And there are some stores like Trader Joe's and places like that where you can find actually very affordable organic
Mhm.
food. But I would say there's other ways to go green, so to speak, that are not expensive. Like, for example, you can make cleaners out of, baking soda and vinegar. That's very, very cheap. Composting is free. That's something
Mhm.
I do at home. I keep, my food scraps in a little bucket and then I bring it outside to the compost bin. And then I have free compost for my garden because I grow a garden in the summer. So that's free. Shopping at the thrift store is a great way to recycle clothing. That's cheaper. So it just kind of depends. So I
Mhm.
always just look at it as an investment in, overall it kind of balances out and it's an investment in our health and the planet's health for
Right.
everybody. So,
And then, another thing that sometimes I find confusing is, labels and certifications. Now, before you had one label, it said organic. Now there's could be like 3 to 4, and okay, if it already said organic, why are all these other certifications there too? Why is that needed? What does that mean? I thought organic was, organic. Why do we need other certifications?
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I guess there's just different certifications for different things. Like, for example, with organic cotton, there's something called GOTS. It's the Global Organic Textile Standard. So it's
Mhm.
specifically just for the cotton, because it's a little different than food. But I would definitely say that when you're looking for products, like if you go to the health food store, when you see the USDA organic label, it does mean something.
Mhm.
It means that there's third party certification and then it's overseen by the US Department of Agriculture.
Mhm.
Whereas when the labels say, for example, like all natural, that really doesn't have any legal definition. It doesn't mean
Right.
anything. Apples are all natural, but then when they're sprayed with pesticides, it's not really all natural
Right.
anymore. So that's more, things to look for. But like cruelty free and all those things, people can certainly look up online now what that all means, and there's certain
Mhm.
standards in place. So it's good to look for certifications because it's a little more legitimate than the all natural thing.
Right, right, right. And I know you're big on the whole toxins and the environment, and that's another thing that's also confusing because they're very long words, and what we see are abbreviations.
Yeah.
So, um, and we're not chemists and scientists, and deciphering all this too. We're trying to all become aware, but then there's all these challenges of deciphering, and we're being pulled in so many different directions. Do we check our smartphones every second? I mean, what's a simpler way to, you know, get through this? I saw your TED talk, which was amazing, and you did things that were so simple, and how the Mount Sinai for Children's Hospital came up with the rhyme
Yep.
for the plastics, which maybe you could talk about that and touch upon your TED talk you had at Adelphi University.
Yeah, I did that talk 2 years ago, or 2018. Now it's 3 years ago. And yeah, I was trying to just make the whole concept very simple, you know. So with that rhyme that you're talking about, when it comes to plastics, like usually plastic containers have a number on them from 1 to 7, and it's the different types of plastics. And some of them tend to leach chemicals more than others. So they came up with this rhyme that goes 5, 4, 1, and 2. All the rest are bad for you. Like for example, plastic number 6, when you see polystyrene, it's styrofoam, and styrene is a known carcinogen. So why we're serving hot coffee in styrofoam still these days, I don't know, but you know, it's probably from lobbyists and government. But you know, so just those kind of things to be aware of. And also, I use apps. There's a wonderful organization down in DC called Environmental Working Group, ewg.org, and they have an app called the Healthy Living app, where you can put in pretty much any sort of product like a shampoo, and it will tell you, like, it gives you a ranking in red or green if it's eco-friendly and safe or not. So the Healthy Living app is a good one. And there's a funny one called Think Dirty, but it's really just about cleaners. So you can put in your cleaning products, because detergents have so many chemicals, you know, and perfumes and all that, which can be hormone disruptors. It's a lot.
So
It's a lot.
yeah, yeah,
Just
it is a lot, but
email me.
thankfully we have these apps too, and I'm definitely going to try that. Um, so um, exactly how many years now that you've been doing this, from graduating from college till
Oh,
now? Like, I know you've had many roles. Which one have which one was like the most dear to you that, you've had in your career?
wow. In all of it, oh, so many things. From working on, you know, clean energy, we've worked on offshore wind and solar and doing all kinds of campaigns and outreach. I tend to love doing public presentations. It's kind of funny, like I get so nervous, and most people would rather die but than give a public presentation, but I find it's a great way to connect with people and just answer people's questions directly. So I love doing that, and the radio show I think is exciting, and yeah, just all of it.
Yeah, and have you found now, like, when did you see an increase in awareness actually come into action with, communities and across Long Island, across the boroughs, across New York State? Since you've been doing this for quite some time, and of course, you have hurdles to get over. When did you actually kind of say, "Oh my gosh, there's a wave of change happening now"? Like, and that aha, it's coming to fruition.
Yeah, you know, I would say probably in the last decade or so, things are really changing a lot. Um, Honestly, I thought like when Al Gore came out with the film, you know, the Inconvenient Truth, things shifted then. Although strangely enough, at least on the federal level, as we've seen, things shifted back
Hmm.
recently to, you know, being we're all about coal, which was really strange because there's so much opportunity and economic development opportunity in clean energy. But I think what really gives me uh, pause when I see it is when I go into like Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks and I see that they have vegan, you know, plant-based meats, and Burger King has plant-based meats, because I've been vegetarian since 1991. And it's like, what is going on? This is great, you know, like things are starting to, you know, because the meat eating has an environmental impact as well in terms of greenhouse gases and, you know, pollutants and various other things. So I think that's been, you know, gratifying to
Right, right.
see like the movement, because there's so many organizations that I've been part of over the years, you know, that are all working towards the same goals. So slowly, slowly getting there.
Now, like, let's say, I'm not a vegan or vegetarian, but I am conscious about the environment. Like, how do we, if this is our way of eating, but also respect the environment? What do we look for in our farmers?
Sure, that's a great question. So, there's always like the standard three, which is to look for organic when you can, certainly because it's grown without pesticides and toxic fertilizers. Um, Shop local, to try and support our local farmers. Like here on
Hmm.
Long Island, we have quite a few farms, and I know they bring vegetables to the farmers markets in New York City, which
Hmm.
is really great. Like in Union Square, they have an amazing farmers market.
Right, right.
Um, Organic, local, and yeah, and plant-based as much as possible. Maybe not everyone's going to go vegetarian, but just realizing that plant-based foods have less of an impact because meat products contain, they require so much more land and water and energy inputs to produce them. And, cows produce methane and all these kind of things, which is a greenhouse gas. So as much as we can do, everything makes a difference. And
Right. And also now that we've been living through this pandemic, and definitely using hand sanitizers and disinfectants, and you know we thought maybe, oh, this will just be for a month
Mhm.
or two, but now it's going into a year, and be most likely an everyday thing. um, there's an effect, right, with all these things we're using that's being marketed to us, and I'm sure there's a lot of ways we can find healthier ways to sanitize and protect ourselves from the COVID-19 and other viruses that do exist. And has this been something that you've been closely watching and paying attention to and promoting?
Yeah, as much as we can. We actually, through Green Inside and Out, we created a little video. We were contacted by local university students that had to do a video project. And I said, oh, this is a perfect opportunity for us to make a video about how to make your own hand sanitizer. And it's basically, following the CDC recommendations that you just have, I think it's 75% alcohol. You can also put in hydrogen peroxide and those the combination, and if you want to put a little scent or something, and that makes a nice liquid spray hand sanitizer. So we put the video up on our website, which is greeninsideandout.org, if anyone wants to see it. And I did a blog post about it because I just wanted to make sure that people realize it's not always just about the Clorox and Lysol, because if you look at that EWG, the Environmental Working Group database that I mentioned earlier, those both of those get a D, like on a ranking from A to F, like a school, report card, because they contain some kind of long chemical that I can't remember the name of that's, not good for us. So obviously, I think it's unavoidable. It's to some extent, it's a pandemic. We have to do what we can do, but if we can seek out other alternatives, it might be
Right,
worth.
or for everyday sanitizing. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, definitely. And
and
especially if
peroxide.
there's young people that were putting hand sanitizers, and they're going to put their hands in their mouth, and
Yep,
it's even more challenging. So the cleaner we can do that, the better. Um,
yep.
so talk a little more about what you're working on right now. What's on your agenda right now?
Well, at work or my day job, we've been working a lot on making sure there are more electric vehicle chargers around New York State.
Mm-hmm.
A few months ago, I just bought an electric vehicle, a used one. They're a little expensive, so I got a used one.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's been really exciting to, I just plug it in my driveway with a plug that I have, and go around with that. So we've been working on that
Let me see
initiative.
if I could get that car up for you. I'm going to try. I'm getting a little more savvy with my Zoom. Let's see. I'm going to share it. Is everyone
Oh,
seeing that? So that's your electric vehicle. So is it all electric or is it hybrid? Explain that. I don't own a car. I don't know what this is all about.
oh. Yeah, city people probably don't even need vehicles, but out here on Long Island, we do. We rely on them a lot, unfortunately. But um, yeah, so it's almost fully electric, but I got the one with a range extender, which means it carries 2 gallons of gas, which can get you, another 75, 80 miles just in case. But otherwise, it has a range of 200 miles. And during COVID, especially, it hasn't been an issue because working from home.
Right.
So, and there's
And
chargers
how do
around,
you, so you, what do you do? Charge it at home? I mean, like, how do you plug it in, like in a regular
Yep,
outlet, or, I mean, is there
yep,
a
from a
special?
regular outlet so far, but I'm getting a special charger that charges it a little faster. They're called level two,
Hmm.
because this method is kind of slow. I mean, it takes over a day to go from zero to full, but I
Wow.
haven't always needed it to be full either, so it hasn't been an issue. But yeah, the level two will charge it up in a couple of hours, and that's it.
Does that
So.
increase your electrical bill? I mean, I mean, like, I'm just curious. Like,
It does a little bit, but I also do community solar at my house. So that's another thing people can do. Like, even if you can't have solar panels on your own house, what they're doing is there's a mechanism by which, if there's a big solar array that's put out, like here on Long Island, someplace, you can buy a share in it. So it's almost like having solar on your house, but you're really just owning a share of an existing solar company,
oh,
so a
wow.
project rather. So that makes my bill go down, and it's almost
Hmm.
been a wash. Like doing the solar and then adding the vehicle has been almost neutral,
Breaking even.
breaking
Oh,
even. Yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah, I had no idea, and that's so you live out there on Long Island. What is it like people here in the boroughs in New York City? Are there, you know, people like you that we could reach out to, or resources? It is overwhelming. I know they're out there, but I feel like who's who, where do I start?
Yep, absolutely. So I've worked with a team of folks in the downstate area, and there's so many different organizations that they all work for. But the main one that I would recommend, obviously, is New York State. Uh, it's the NYSERDA, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority,
Hmm.
NYSERDA, and also Con Edison is the utility. They actually have, they're required actually by the government to make sure that they have energy efficiency programs, like for your home to do insulation, replacing light bulbs, all that
Hmm.
kind of thing. National Grid offers incentives for heating equipment. So all those things, those would be the two places to look on Con Ed's website and NYSERDA. They have all kinds of incentives and rebates for energy efficiency.
Yeah, I
And I think,
remember when Con Ed was going around to all the retail businesses a few years ago, and they were swapping out everyone's light bulbs for energy efficiency, and it was all, comped, like there was no cost to the business owners, which I thought was a great initiative. And
yep,
hope that one day comes to, the residences, and apartments. And but they've been proactive in that sense. Yeah, I do recall that, which is great. Um,
New York City has so many initiatives. I'm so like jealous. I always wanted to live in the city. In Brooklyn, you have the great co-op, and there's all kinds of drop-off places for food
mhm.
scraps and planting a million trees. And the city's just way ahead of us out here.
Oh,
We're
really?
trying to catch up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised by that because you think Long Island is suburbs, it's green, and oh.
Getting there. We're trying.
Well, thankfully they have you out there, and do
Many
you have
other
other
groups
people
too.
that you collaborate with?
Yeah, yeah, there's so many wonderful environmental groups out here. One of my friends actually is a biologist, and he's the one who like rescues the seals or the whales when
Mm,
they wash up on the shore, or the turtles, and helps to rehabilitate them. And there's all kinds of open space groups and things like that. So I try to highlight all these folks on my radio show so that people know that these good things are going on. There's plenty of
mhm.
groups working on clean energy and working with places of worship to go green, all kinds of things going on, which is great.
That's great.
Community
Um,
gardens. Yep.
Yeah, so and I know, like, being out in Long Island, there was always a concern about the cancer rates, especially with women, and breast cancer. Was that actually, proven fact? Like, they did make these connections of, the toxins that were being used. I don't know what it was, a spray or lawn treatments. was ongoing. Were those eventually banned, or are they still in use? I mean, it still seems like a gray area. It's a big controversy on it, but I don't
That's
know. I'm just interested because I've had people in the family who've had cancer, but were not exposed to what the women in Long Island were. But I remember them being asked, like if they ate a lot of fruit, because of the pesticides that could have been on them unknowingly, if they used some kind of pesticides in their homes. So yeah, I just wanted to know your take on that.
Yeah, that's a very complicated question because I do work with several breast cancer groups out here on Long Island, Huntington Breast Cancer Action Coalition and Great Neck. And, many years ago, there was a big, comprehensive study that was funded by the federal government to try and figure out what it was that was causing the high rate of breast cancer on Long Island. And actually, at the time, it was inconclusive. Like they just couldn't identify one thing. They weren't sure if it's air pollutants out here or water, because on Long Island, unlike the city where I think you get your water from reservoirs
Hmm.
upstate,
Yes.
we derive our drinking water from underneath the ground, from aquifers. So it's you know basically we do have a lot of chemicals in the water, but they all have to be filtered out before they are delivered.
Hmm.
The water is delivered to the home. But it's very controversial because
Yeah.
people are saying it was the pesticide use, or we still don't really know. But even right now we have 1,4-dioxane in the water. It's a chemical that's a carcinogen, and the municipalities are trying to figure out how to get it out, and
Hmm.
it's a lot. There's PFAS, it's a fire retardant in the water, so
Wow.
still
Yeah.
ongoing.
I remember you mentioning about the fire retardant in microwave popcorn.
Yep, in the popcorn bags.
Yeah.
And it's
That.
a liver toxin. I
Wow.
know.
It's everywhere. But we don't have. It's we. What I like the way you're presenting it. It's not to panic. It's more about getting knowledge and making changes, which I find relieving that okay, I could handle this and not be in a panic mode about everything and get
Yeah.
into a paranoid state. And
Yeah. Stress is not good.
yeah.
Stress will make you sick too.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I and being Maltese, explain now your connection with Malta and your feelings about the environment there.
Oh my God. Yeah. So I could talk about Malta for hours. What time are we? uh, well,
It's a cold day, Beth. It's a very cold day. We're all staying warm and toasty.
well, yeah. So in terms of the environment in Malta, what's really interesting is that I had gone in 2000 when I was young, took all my money and went to Malta and lived with a cousin for 5 months over there. And in that time, I got involved with the local environmental group called Friends of the Earth. So we had done a composting campaign and things like that. And so I got involved with them, and I've stayed friends with them ever since. So one of my friends, Martin Gallia De Giovanni, runs Friends of the Earth now, and I'm still in touch with him. I even, spoke to him this week. There's so many groups that are working on environmental issues in Malta, besides Friends of the Earth. I'll tell you about a campaign they have later if you're interested about
Hmm.
bees, because they told me, share this petition when you're giving your talk. But there's, Janista Foundation. They're trying to raise native plants in Malta because we have the endemic species there that are unique to the island. Nature Trust. There's BirdLife Malta because there's a lot of issues with preserving the birds. Dinalart Helwa, the Gaia Foundation, and there's Vincent's Eco Farm. It's an organic farm that's out in the countryside, and it's just so beautiful. And they have a bed and breakfast there. So it's been really nice to get to know all these folks because I go to Malta every few years, and every time I go, I try to meet new people that are in the field, or not new to me, in the field. So it's really encouraging to see that. And there's even some green businesses opening up. There's one in Slima called D Street where they sell all the organic clothing and hemp and you know organic cotton. It's great. There's vegan restaurants now. There's a few. There used to be one called the Grassy Hopper in Valletta, and Gazira as well. It's over there, but I think it changed the name. I heard it changed names. So there's some really good things happening. And in terms of that petition, if you don't mind me mentioning,
Of
Friends of
course.
the Earth they've worked on many campaigns. I think one of the biggest environmental issues happening in Malta is the overdevelopment. It's
Hmm.
just a lot of buildings being put up, and it's very visible. I think anyone can see that. There's a lot of traffic as well, cars. So Friends of the Earth has worked on that, but lately they've also been getting into food and agriculture and working with the local farmers to promote the local
Hmm.
farms, encouraging people to eat Maltese produce, and purchase Maltese produce. So they created a map of the local farms in Malta, and they have a petition right on their homepage. It's foemalta.org, FOE Malta.org. If you go there, I can share it, afterwards as well,
Hmm.
but they're trying to work on an initiative to preserve bees, and ultimately, which really means kind of phasing out pesticides. And obviously, the farmers there still depend on pesticides, so they're just trying to work with them slowly, and it's part of a European Union effort as well to preserve bees because we're finding that they're in decline.
Right.
So,
So, like with Maltese farming and Goziton farming, what when was that shift that you think they went into pesticides? Because of course, things were all natural, you know, quite some time ago. And was it because of supply and demand, or was it something invaded that they had to get rid of? I mean, when does when did pesticides come into the picture? And now that we need to get rid of it, how does that happen?
mhm. I'm not really sure the genesis of it in Malta, but I know here, I mean, pretty much globally, it was after the 1940s we started
Mm,
using most of these chemical pesticides just, to compete, to keep up with human population,
hmm.
to produce more without probably realizing the longer term impacts it would have. So I assume it was probably the same there in Malta.
Right, right. And do you find that there's a change happening there? People are becoming more aware to buy organically, and do they have the same kind of labeling that they would have here? Like, how do we know it's organic, or like who's
Yeah.
checking on that? I know it's not your area, but maybe you have some knowledge from people you've collaborated with there.
Yeah, actually, the regulations in Europe tend to be better than they are here in the United States. They do have organic. It's a different organization, so it obviously doesn't say U.S. organic on it. It's like a European label that says
Mm-hmm.
organic, but you can look for that. And I have noticed over the years that even the regular grocery markets there are carrying more organic food, which is really exciting. And one thing that Europe does that we don't do here is they label their genetically modified foods. So
Mm-hmm.
even on, you get a package of Bagilla, for example, it will say if it uses GMO soy, oil from soy products or something, which we
Right.
don't have here. So there's legislation in Europe. I don't know much about it. I just know it's called
Mm-hmm.
REACH, REACH, that
Mm-hmm.
governs chemical use. So I tend to trust their products even more. They have
Right.
beautiful like beauty products from Italy and all that stuff.
So I'm going to let people, if they'd like to ask you a question, I'm going to start opening that now. And again, just remind everybody that we are on an internet connection and not to panic if we lose connection. We'll just sit tight and come back on. So if anyone would like to ask Beth a question, you're open to do that.
Yeah, I know. I could talk about Malta forever. So I don't know
What?
if you wanted to talk about my family, where we came from,
Yeah,
just in case
definitely.
people are curious. But
Yeah.
my grandparents came from the three cities, from Cospicua and Birgu, and we had family in Zabar as well. So my dad was born there in Vitoriosa, and Malta makes me cry
Oh.
when I think about it. My
Oh.
grandmother, my grandmother was a seamstress in Queens for many years, and my grandpa, Joe Fiteni, he worked as a building superintendent on 7th Avenue, and they came in 1950. So I always cry when I think about them.
They're happy tears, and that's why I do this show. It's I really want to give Maltese people their presence and profile them, what they've achieved, where they've come from, and how they got here. And you're showing your true passion for your Maltese identity, and that's amazing. And I feel the same way. I'm proud to be a Maltese American, and every time I can, I go back. Anything that's Maltese, I'm proud to talk about it, and I always try to make myself as knowledgeable as possible about what Malta is and what it is to be Maltese.
Yeah,
And
so special.
and
It's so unique. I mean, I just love Malta so much, and I grew up, my grandparents had this old picture of the three cities looking from the Upper Baraka, and I
mhm.
have it here in my house. And, so it was just amazing to me the first time I went to Malta. I was 19 years old, and, to go and stand there, it was like, oh. I
Yeah.
remember coming on the plane, and I was sitting next to this Maltese woman. I told her I'm Maltese American, and she said, "Welcome home."
Oh.
And I felt that, yeah, that was it. I was in love.
So when you were
There's
growing up,
Valletta behind me. You see it in the picture of
yeah.
there's Valletta.
So when you were growing up and knowing, you were of Maltese descent, and were you ever asked like, "Oh, where are you from?"
Yes.
And
Oh, where is that?
how did you answer that? Like, I always had that happen to me. I'm curious how you handled that. And you grew up in Long Island, or did you grow up somewhere else and then move to Long Island?
Yep. My grandparents lived in Queens, but I grew up on Long Island. By the time I got around, came around, we were on Long Island. So yeah, most people don't even know where Malta is. So I'd say, well, it's a country near Italy, and they always say, "What do you speak there? Spanish?" I said, "No, Maltese." So yeah, it's always a lot of explaining to do, but I'm very proud of it. I think we're so unique, and it's just so special. We still have family there in St. Julian's and Slima around there, and I have a little apartment in Malta, so I always have a little toe over there.
Right.
um, yeah, and I wanted to point out too that even how I sort of keep my Maltese roots with me. I mean, I always have my Maltese crosses on, always. I have all my Maltese stuff with me, my pottery I could show you. I have my flag and my pottery and all that
Oh,
stuff.
right. And you do the Maltese anthem, right? For the
Yes,
show.
there's the Maltese glass.
Yes.
Yep, I
And you
keep
have that.
everything. I keep even my packets of Galetti. I don't give up any. I have tickets from the buses I used to ride from 20 years ago.
I get
But
it.
but I use the Maltese anthem as the opening music to my radio show. I had
Right.
someone play it on the flute for me. Do 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 do. And people ask me sometimes, "What is that?" I'm like, "It's the Maltese anthem."
And they're like, why?
Yep, yep. So, and my book, actually, the cover of the book, the
Right.
little wardrobe there.
Yes.
Oh yes, that was drawn by my friend Lara Spiteri. I'll give her a shout out. She's a
Hmm.
fashion designer in Malta, and on the wardrobe, if you look closely, there's a little Maltese cross.
I'm
It's a little tiny
yes,
Maltese cross she put there for me.
is that
Yep,
it? Right there.
yep.
I like
So,
that, you like you said, you have a toe in St. Julian's, and you put a, toe here
yep.
and a toe in the radio show with the anthem. Since we're talking about Malta and Maltese, So how did you come to the Maltese Center and how did you discover it? And what year was that?
Gosh, I think it was around 2005, I want to say, probably 15 years ago. And I had found it online. I was just, seeking any sort of Maltese-ness in New York. And it was so great. I found it and I came in one day with my Maltese flag like a lunatic. And Mr. Kermey was there. He was the president at the
Right.
time. And he said, would you like to become a member? And I said, yes, of course, sign me up. And then afterwards, I found out that I was only the second woman to ever become a full member that wasn't part of the auxiliary committee. So little did I know I was this pioneering feminist woman in the Maltese Club. I was like, what?
Sometimes better to be unknowing, right? Because it makes you braver.
Yeah, so of course I've been a member ever since, and it's great. I'm so glad that we have that place and the pastizzi and
Just
Lely,
knowing that we have it and that we have a Maltese footprint and presence, right? That's how I
yes.
feel.
And in
Whether I'm there or not.
yes, yes. In fact, I went to Australia last year to visit cousins there, Maltese family, and they brought me to the La Valette Club, the
Hmm.
Maltese club in Blacktown, in near Sydney. So I got to see that one as well. And there's one up in Toronto, I believe,
Right,
in
right.
there. So
Yeah. We have a question here. Sorry if I delayed. I just noticed it now. Let me. Okay. Hey, Nikki.
Hi, Beth. Nice to meet you.
nice to meet
Uh, I'm Maltese too,
you.
100% Maltese. I actually came here to live in New York about 8 years ago, so still fresh a bit. Thank you for everything you said. I actually took quite a bunch of notes already. Very exciting. I had known of only a few things that you said, so everything you said is really, really useful. I'm definitely gonna check your website again and your blog for extra tips. Because I'm always on the lookout to do better. I feel it more conscious to even be a bit more kind of environmental friendly ever since, because of the whole pandemic, I found myself always spending more time at home and,
Mm.
washing more dishes, cooking more, buying more groceries. And suddenly it's like, obviously, even my own waste is like on the increase. It's not that it wasn't before, but because it was dispersed between the office and home, and I go out to eat,
Mhm.
I was probably less conscientious about how much what we use and how we use and how much waste and all of that. So you know everything said, basically what you're doing is really good. I definitely appreciate your initiative. There are not many who are so environmentally conscious, so passionate, and actually do it, and help others to do it. I just have like a couple of things. One is kind of more of a maybe discussion topic. Something that is kind of worrying me, especially with the pandemic, the use and constant use of wearing the masks.
Mm.
Obviously, I'm aware of that. We unfortunately we cannot do without them. It's kind of obviously hopefully preventing us from getting the virus. But I'm very conscious and aware we're just using and throwing away, especially obviously the surgical masks, not the fabric ones.
Yeah.
So I was curious what you think about that, and unfortunately, probably the impact on the environment, and maybe whether how, as humans, we could better dispose of them, if at all. And the second is more of a question that I have. I'm really curious to understand and hear more how kids today are getting educated more around the environment and how they can actually do better through living their lives. I know initially you spoke a little bit about the kids here, and I'm also curious to see whether any some maybe extracurricular or even like curricular educational programs as part of the kids in school in Malta, whether they're actually teaching them ways and means to be more
Mhm.
conscientious and live a better eco-friendly life with their family.
Yeah. Okay, so well, the first one about the masks, that's a really tricky one because as far as I've heard so far, there really haven't been many initiatives that I know of to be recycling the masks or, disposing of them other than just throwing them in the garbage, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And, the other thing that concerns me is that a lot of them are made of polyester. and
Yeah.
polyester is plastic, which is made of oil. So, and there can be those microplastics, microparticles that people are breathing in with the dyes on the, you know. So I'm looking for my mask I have somewhere around here, but I try to use one that's made with organic cotton that doesn't have dyes on it. And
Oh, okay.
nothing's perfect, but at least at least something made of plant-based material would be biodegradable ultimately, even if it ends up in the landfill. But
Mhm.
I have a feeling eventually, and probably in New York City ahead of everyone else, we'll figure out a way to, maybe recycle or something. We'll do
Yeah.
something with that. That's a tricky one.
Mm.
But in terms of the children, yeah, I mean, I think it varies. Here it varies from school to school. I think it depends on the teachers and who takes initiative. Um, but in Malta, I'm not really sure. Like, I know that years ago, there used to be something called the Maltese hedgehog, and he would go
Oh,
around. He
yeah.
was like a little mascot that would shake hands.
Shumimu. I remember Shumimu.
Yes, Chumimu. But
Yeah.
but I don't think they have it anymore, so I'm not really sure.
Oh, it's been a while.
Probably,
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been there, but my nephew, or nor my niece actually mentioned Shumimu. I remember that
yes.
mascot. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure they're getting educated, but I'm not sure. Probably all those groups, like I mentioned, Friends of the Earth and them, they would know.
Yeah, I'm actually curious. I actually want to open the discussion even with my sister because I'm an aunt and my sister still lives in Malta and the kids go to school there. Um, because it is interesting and obviously I'm very aware of their future and given the climate change and the impact on the environment, I'm really hoping that they're growing up with not just an awareness but a bit of an activism, so to speak, in them to do
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's exciting to see like the, Greta Thunberg there from
Um,
she's there in Europe doing so much on climate change and she's spoken at the United Nations. It's very inspiring. So I hope the, young kids are watching that. I had a
mhm.
group of teenagers on my radio show actually
Mm.
that do some work locally. They go and speak to their elected officials and everything. I mean, they're braver than I was at their age. So it's nice to see that.
Yeah, that's good. Good to hear. I'll definitely look out by the way for the organic masks, organic cotton masks.
Yeah,
Thanks for that. Yeah.
they have them online.
Okay, good.
Etsy is a
Definitely.
good source.
Cool. Thanks, Beth. That was
Sure,
helpful.
sure.
Yeah, I was just, my wheels were turning in my head, and I said, hopefully in the near future, when we can reopen the Maltese Center, we can have a eco day and bring in the youth, and you can elaborate, kind of touch on what Nikki was saying, and bring it here, and
Yeah,
something positive
that
after
would
we've
be
been
nice.
holed up for so long, to look forward to, and start anew, and start a new initiative of, living healthier and living greener. And we have you as our member, and,
Yeah.
we need to use you and use your resources and bring that to light to our community, which I'm so proud to have you part of it. And I know how passionate you are about what you do and passionate about being Maltese. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I know you were saying, like, yesterday when we did our pre-interview, how the Maltese language. Yeah, that's one of my things too. I wish I could speak it fluently. I could understand it, um, uh, and hopefully one day I'll have time and patience to learn to speak Maltese.
Yeah.
It's a weakness of mine. I'm admitting that to everybody. I'm not a
You.
linguist. It's one of the hardest things for me is learning a language. I could learn many things, but my brain is not quite there for learning foreign languages.
Yeah, because my mom is from Ireland, so we spoke English in the house, but my dad who's there, Roy Fiteni, he spoke to my grandparents in Maltese, so I grew up hearing it, so I understand it a bit, and I tried to study, but I'd love to be fluent.
Right, right. So, did you want to talk about, again, about the bee thing? I know you wanted to kind of end it off with what's going on in Malta and the Friends of the Earth and what they can do. I know there's some kind of initiative going on right now.
Yeah, so again, it's right on the homepage of the Friends of the Earth Malta website. It's FOE Malta.org, and it's a petition that people can sign basically to help like with the farmers restoring biodiversity. I'm just reading a little bit, supporting the farmers that are in transition to reduce pesticide use to protect the bees. And certainly we all love our Maltese honey, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that's really important. We want to preserve that. So I encourage people to check that out. And I think you just need your Maltese passport number or an ID card,
Mm-hmm.
to, you know, to show that you're really, you know, Maltese to
And
sign
what is
it.
it? And what is it here that is on your radar and you're hoping people will support now? Like what is your topic now that you like? We have Malta. You said the bees. Now, what is your topic that you'd like for us to be aware and support?
Oh, wow. Geez, so many things. I like the top of mind is really now the food waste issue because at least here in the United States, the EPA is estimating that about 30 or 40% of the food that gets produced goes to waste.
Wow.
So if we can really start to minimize that, and it has methane impacts too, because when it ends up in the landfill, then it's causing, you know, greenhouse gases as it breaks down, which causes climate change. So most people would never think, oh, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
tossing out my food and it's contributing to climate change. So I think those two things, you know, and if anyone's interested in the podcast, they can tune in and listen to some of the leaders that I interview.
Right, right. No, that
But
it's good to be aware because as a city dweller, it's hard to think of environment. You know, we've got skyscrapers and cement. You know, you think that's it. You know, throw your garbage out, it's gone. You know,
yeah,
so
yeah.
it's great that you're highlighting on that. And I just want to also say, you know, I've got your book here, and you know, you did this before it became a fad and a thing. You know,
Yeah,
now we go into stores and they're saying our jeans, you know, we use, you know, low, you know, waste water and H&M recycling clothes. And I think you were, you know, paving the way with this. And
trying.
it's available on Amazon, and it's a great book. I got the hardcover, and hopefully when I see you again, you'll be able to sign it for me.
Sure.
I'll be honored. I have my little Maltese authored library here.
Oh,
So I've
me
been
too.
collecting. Yes, I've been
All my
collecting.
Maltese books up here.
There you go. I collect them, and I try to get them signed. So I really want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your passion for the environment and what you do, and sharing your passion about being Maltese and being part of our community at the Maltese Center. We, you know, I feel, you know, very blessed to have you as part of our community, and, you know, working with you in the near future when we can reopen, and seeing how we could do changes at the center too, to be more green.
Yep. I want to thank my family who's listening there, my dad, my Uncle Tony, my cousin Catherine. Thank you everybody for listening.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, it's Catherine Kate D. Marr.
Yes.
She
Yep.
said, woo, she said, woohoo, beautiful car, Beth.
Yeah. Thank you.
And
Great job, Beth. You did a great job.
Thank you.
And I love listening to you.
Thank you.
and,
She's got a Prius.
I have a Prius, yeah.
oh, great. And Tom Gregg joined us. He said he was sorry he was late, but he was here.
Oh, good.
It's so nice to have somebody pronounce my name the right way.
Yeah. I always know
Beth.
Maltese people when I meet people at work, and Mr. Mifsud or whatever, I say, are you Maltese? Yeah.
Nice to see you all.
Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right. So next week, IL-MALTIN TAGNA in February, we're going to have Nikki Conti, who's actually someone here in our audience, and she's also a member at the Maltese Center. And she will be, you know, showcasing her street photography and also a special feature on documenting the pandemic and explaining what it was like and is like living during the pandemic here in New York. And that will be on February 7th. And again, thank you everyone for joining us. This will also be recorded on and available on YouTube. And again, I really appreciate everybody's support, and I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. Be well.
Thank you, Carmen, for doing this. It's really great.
You're very welcome, Beth. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thanks,
All
Carmen.
right.
Thanks, Beth.
Thank you, Beth.